1996 saw the release of memorable films such as Happy Gilmore, Independence Day, Scream, Fargo, Mission Impossible, Space Jam, Twister, Mars Attacks, Jerry Maguire, Sling Blade, From Dusk Till Dawn, Trainspotting, The Nutty Professor, Kingpin, and Escape from L.A. We saw the release of hit records such as All Eyes on Me by Tupac, Anima by Tool, No Code by Pearl Jam, Reasonable Doubt by Jay-Z, Antichrist Superstar by Marilyn Manson, Evil Empire by Rage Against the Machine, The Coming by Busta Rhymes, Load by Metallica, debut albums from Sublime and the Spice Girls, Down on the Upside by Soundgarden, and Tidal by Fiona Apple. On television, we saw the debuts of Third Rock from the Sun, True Hollywood Story, Nash Bridges, Forensic Files, Dexter's Laboratory, The Daily Show, The Rosie O'Donnell Show, Kenan and Kel, Blue's Clues, Access Hollywood, Dragon Ball Z, Judge Judy, Arthur, Hey Arnold, and The Crocodile Hunter. But all this paled in comparison to what was happening in Extreme Championship Wrestling. While Austin 316 and the NWO defined pivotal eras in both the WWF and WCW, ECW was blazing their own trail with innovative characters and captivating storylines. With Paul Heyman leading the creative charge, 1996 proved to be an incredibly influential year that turned heads and put the company on a whole new level. Join us on this trip as we journey back to ECW in 1996. The January 2nd edition of ECW TV began with ECW making their New York City debut with footage airing from Holiday Hell. Joey Styles was interrupted by Stevie Richards, who had his new lackey, the Blue Meanie, in tow. The Meanie sported a blue mohawk, glasses painted on his face, and a belly shirt and Daisy Dukes similar to Richards. The only difference was that Meanie had a belly much larger than Richards. After insulting the fans, Richards noticed a special guest in the crowd, legendary wrestling manager Missy Hyatt. Richards attempted to sweet-talk her, but she wasn't impressed. Hyatt changed her mind about Richards once he said he could get her a date with Raven. She made out with Richards, telling him to deliver that message back to Raven. Richards was ecstatic, leaping in the air, with Styles informing Hyatt that he knows Raven too. 2 Gold Scorpio defended both the ECW Tag Team and Television Championship against Mikey Whipwreck. Scorpio took joy in tossing Mikey around and locking him in submissions. He dropped the bomb on Mikey, nailing his moonsault leg drop. Mikey kicked out, with Scorpio then connecting with a stiff super kick. Scorpio spit on Mikey and then climbed to the top rope. Mikey shoved the knees of Scorpio, crotching him on the top turnbuckle and nailing a Franken Mikey. Multiple pinfall attempts followed, but Mikey couldn't keep the champion down. Scorpio used his legs to shove Mikey, who in turn crashed into the referee. The champion leaped off the top rope with a big splash, with Mikey moving and Scorpio landing on referee John Finnegan. Scorpio connected with a super kick, with a powerbomb soon following. Cactus Jack raced to the ring, planting Scorpio with a double-arm DDT and tossing Mikey on top. Finnegan made the 3 count, with Mikey winning both the television championship and the tag team championships. Cactus grabbed one of the tag belts, with Mikey handing the other to Scorpio. Displeased, Cactus attacked Scorpio and handed one of the belts back to Mikey. Backstage, Cactus Jack presented the ECW tag team titles and Mikey Whipwreck to a bloody Raven. Not in the mood, Raven threw the belts down and called Mikey worthless. Raven shoved Cactus repeatedly into lockers before staring him in the eyes and saying, "Don't ever fail me." Sabu battled Stevie Richards on January 5th at House Party 96, with Stevie stalling from the start. This led to Sabu diving over the ropes with a triple jump splash onto both Stevie and the Blue Meanie. Sabu continued his assault in the ring, with Stevie surprisingly holding his own. Meanie got involved, giving Richards an unfair advantage. A woozy Sabu dove off a chair at Stevie, who moved, and in turn sent Sabu crashing through a table. Sabu battled back, and even took out Meanie in the process. Stevie was put through a table by Sabu with a diving leg drop, with Paul E. dangerously hitting the scene to beat down the Meanie. Paul E. threw Stevie back into the ring, where he continued to give Sabu a fight. With a crack, Stevie planted a Stevie kick to the jaw of Sabu. Paul E. screamed at Sabu to shake it off, as Stevie crawled on top of Sabu, only scoring a 2 count. But it was the homicidal, suicidal, genocidal Sabu that reigned supreme, hitting an atomic Arabian facebuster off the top rope, sending a chair crashing onto Stevie's face. This was enough to put Stevie away, with Sabu scoring a big victory. The main event featured the farewell match for the Public Enemy, who were leaving for WCW. After receiving a tremendous ovation, Public Enemy went into battle against the Gangstas. The brawling began as soon as the bell rang, with New Jack bloodying Johnny Grunge with a nightstick dangling from a noose. Rocco Rock saved his partner, throwing a pie at Jack. Mustafa manhandled Rocco, while Grunge bloodied Jack with an iron to the forehead. Rocco bloodied Mustafa with the nightstick, and then put him through a table with a somersault plancha to the floor. New Jack made the save, attacking Grunge and brawling with him through the crowd and towards the Eagle's Nest. Jack leaped off the stage, hitting Grunge with a big splash. They continued brawling back to the ring, where Mustafa pummeled Rocco. Mustafa sent Rocco through a table with a Vader bomb. Shortly after, Rocco put Mustafa through a table with a moonsault off the top rope. Rocco then leaped off the top rope with a drive-by, crashing onto Mustafa and scoring a pinfall victory. Rocco took the microphone and called the fans the greatest in the world. He then invited anyone from the locker room to join them for one last dance. The January 9th edition of ECW TV saw Stevie Richards announce that Raven broke his leg at a live event and couldn't face Tommy Dreamer. Instead, Raven sent the Blue Meanie to fight his battle, but Dreamer wasn't buying it. Dreamer made quick work of both Meanie and Richards, pinning each one and even setting Beulah up for a pile driver. Out came Raven, who tossed the ring steps at Dreamer, leading to a brutal beatdown around ringside. He set Dreamer up on the Timekeeper's table, putting him through it with a dive over the top rope into the floor. Back in the ring, Dreamer drilled Raven and Richards with 3 DDTs each, receiving a "He's Hardcore" chant from the fans. Raven retreated to the floor, with Dreamer bashing him over the head with a chair and slicing his forehead with a cheese grater. Fans handed Dreamer more weapons, which he used to bust open the forehead of Raven. The brawl made its way through the crowd and outside into the snow, with Dreamer soon covered in blood. They battled back to the ring, where Dreamer accidentally took out the referee with a flying forearm. Beulah hopped into the ring with hairspray, with Dreamer ducking and Raven blinded. Stevie attempted to assist Raven, but instead got drilled with the even flow DDT. Dreamer then planted Raven with a DDT, only getting a 2 count. He tied Raven in a tree of woe, climbed to the second rope, and punched Raven 10 times in the crotch. Dreamer delivered a stiff pile driver to Raven onto a piece of the Timekeeper's table. He made the cover, with Raven kicking out at 2. Once again, referee John Finnegan got knocked out, allowing Stevie to take out Dreamer with a Stevie kick. The Blue Meanie moonsaulted off the top rope, with Dreamer rolling out of the way. Raven got a hold of Dreamer, nailed the even flow, and picked up a pinfall victory. The January 16th episode of ECW TV featured footage from House Party 96, beginning with Bill Alfonso interrupting the introduction by Joey Styles. Alfonso said that he's always hated Styles and began to drone on about all the things he hates. Styles screamed at Alfonso, with Taz racing to the ring. Taz got into the face of Styles, backing him into a corner and telling him never to disrespect Alfonso again. Out came 911, with Alfonso getting in his face. Commissioner Todd Gordon attacked Alfonso, with Taz breaking things up. Officials and wrestlers raced to the scene to get between Taz and 911, who were ready to fight. As 911 was whisked away, Alfonso noticed El Puerto Ricano wearing an anti-Fonzie shirt. Alfonso ripped off the shirt, and Taz suplexed El Puerto Ricano on his head. Styles interjected, with Taz becoming furious and again backing Styles into the corner. 911 returned to the ring to stand up to Taz, only to be ambushed by the Eliminators. As Alfonso hugged Jason, 911 was taken down by total elimination. Rey Mysterio Jr. raced to the ring, dodging the high-risk offense of Perry Saturn and John Kronus and taking them out with an arsenal of his own. A tag team match ensued, with Taz interfering to provide an unfair advantage. 911 was hit with another total elimination, with Taz choking him out with an orange towel afterward, while Alfonso blew on his whistle incessantly. Mysterio climbed onto 911's shoulders, challenging the Eliminators to a chicken fight. Kronus lifted Saturn on his shoulders, with Mysterio jumping off 911's shoulders to Hurricanrana Saturn to the mat and score the pinfall victory. Unfazed, the Eliminators hit Mysterio with total elimination. White Zombie's Thunderkiss 65 blasted through the speakers, with the Pitbulls racing to the ring to brawl with the Eliminators. Meanwhile, Francine attacked Jason, only for the Eliminators to take her out with total elimination. Jason waffled Pitbull number 2 over the back with a steel chair. Pitbull number 2 press slammed Jason over the top rope and onto the Eliminators. Francine was stretchered away by paramedics to end a wild scene. A bout between Bubba Ray Dudley and Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey was interrupted by the surprise return of the franchise Shane Douglas. Standing up to the entire Dudley family, Douglas said that there were a few things he needed to fix in the ECW. He said he was going to teach Bubba proper English and slapped him across the head. Mikey Whipwreck defended the ECW Television Championship against Too Cold Scorpio. Raven interfered, hitting Mikey with an even flow. This allowed Scorpio to score a pinfall victory to become the new television champion. House Party 96 kicked the year off with a hot angle. Joey Styles interviewed the trio of Stevie Richards, the Blue Meanie, and Beulah McGillicuddy. Stevie deemed himself studly after making out with Missy Hyatt at the end of 1995. Stevie said that Raven went on a 4-week bender around the holidays, and thus Beulah was left neglected. In turn, Stevie offered to give Beulah some Christmas cheer. Beulah shoved him away, saying she didn't want to be touched. Embarrassed, Stevie blamed Beulah for making him look bad. Stevie said, "Is it because you're Raven's girlfriend?" Beulah snapped back, saying, "No, I'm pregnant." Stevie jumped around happily, saying he'd be an uncle, with Raven rushing to the ring to get in Beulah's face. Raven berated her for not taking her birth control. She lashed back, saying, "What do you care? It's not even yours." Raven immediately attacked Stevie, with Beulah screaming it wasn't his. As Raven inched towards her, she quietly said into the microphone, "It's Tommy's." Raven snapped, grabbing Beulah by the throat. Tommy Dreamer raced to the ring, throwing rights and lefts at Raven before drilling him with a DDT. A fan threw a frying pan into the ring, with Beulah using it to clobber Stevie and the Meanie. Dreamer waffled Raven with a chair and bounced him off the guardrails around the ring. He reached for a sign that read, "Tommy, use my sign." Dreamer bashed Raven over the head with it, ripping the poster board off to reveal a stop sign. After a DDT onto the stop sign, a fan handed Dreamer a blueberry pie. Dreamer hit Raven with a pile driver onto the pie. Dreamer and Beulah embraced in the ring as Alice in Chains' Man in the Box blared through the speakers. Dreamer walked down a hallway, cutting a promo on Raven. He said, "You want to play a game of one-upsmanship? Well, I'm up one." Dreamer entered a hotel room where Beulah was covering herself in bedsheets. Just as she said she wanted to feel Dreamer's pain, Dreamer told the cameraman to leave. The January 23rd episode of ECW TV featured the debut of Rob Van Dam, who faced Axel Rotten. RVD displayed tremendous aerial skills and lightning-quick kicks. In the end, RVD was victorious with a split-legged moonsault to cap off an impressive debut. The show included a Pulp Fiction montage featuring Tommy Dreamer and Beulah, with Dreamer asking Raven to be the godfather of their child. Raven responded, saying, "You couldn't beat me in the ring, so you decided to beat me at life." Bill Alfonso screamed about his hatred for 911. The Pitbulls and Francine expressed their desire for revenge on the Eliminators. Dreamer urged Mikey Whipwreck to stand on his own 2 feet and leave Cactus Jack behind. Shane Douglas interrupted, offering to team with Dreamer just to get his hands on Cactus Jack. Dreamer asked what was in it for him, with Douglas saying that the first one to win a title will grant the other one a shot. They shook on it. The January 30th edition of ECW TV saw Joey Styles interview Cactus Jack in the ring. He gave his thoughts on the franchise Shane Douglas, saying that the only way to make it in the WWF is to kiss Vince McMahon's ass. Cactus said, "Compared to kissing Todd Gordon's ass, the ass of Vince McMahon is a goddamn smorgasbord, and I'm gonna pucker up." He said that the fans in the ECW arena are soon going to see him in the Philadelphia Spectrum trading wrist locks with Mabel. In the middle of the ring, Stevie Richards apologized to a neck brace wearing Francine for super kicking her. He reminisced about licking fluff off Francine's stomach, but blowing the whole thing by asking Francine if she was pregnant. She yelled at him, with Stevie insulting her. The Pitbulls attacked Stevie, with the Eliminators making the save. This allowed Stevie to hit Stevie kicks on both Pitbulls. While the Eliminators bloodied the Pitbulls, the Gangstas waited for the start of their match. 911 interfered, chokeslamming both Gangstas and the Eliminators. Even Stevie and the Meanie went down to chokeslams. After arguing about whether or not the match should continue, Commissioner Todd Gordon and referee Bill Alfonso came to blows. Taz locked Gordon in the Taz mission, with 911 breaking it up and grabbing Taz by the throat. The Eliminators weighed down Taz to prevent the chokeslam, while Alfonso waffled 911 over the back with a chair. As 911 turned around, Taz jumped onto his back and applied a chokehold. Axel Rotten interfered, quickly getting taken down by total elimination. 911 broke the chokehold and hit the Eliminators with a double chokeslam. Now bloody, the Pitbulls attacked the Gangstas, eventually planting Mustafa with a super bomb. Alfonso broke the count, with Gordon attacking him. Taz took down 911, while Francine broke up an Eliminator's pinfall attempt. Meanie dragged Francine up by the hair, with Stevie kicking her in the face. Mustafa covered a bloody Pitbull number 2 and scored the pinfall victory. Gordon continued his brawl with Alfonso in the aisle, while Taz and 911 tussled with each other towards the entrance. Highlights were shown of a match between Sabu and Rob Van Dam, with Sabu nailing a triple jump somersault plancha into the third row. Sabu laid RVD onto a table in the crowd, nailing an insane acai moonsault with the table remaining intact for a harsher landing. This was the extent of what was shown on television. Cactus Jack and Mikey Whipwreck defended the ECW Tag Team Championships against Tommy Dreamer and the franchise Shane Douglas. The fans sang "Hit the Road Jack" at Cactus, who sported a shirt that said WWF&F. Dreamer showed mercy to Mikey, while Douglas did not, pummeling him on the floor. Douglas was ready to bash Mikey with a chair until Dreamer stopped him, telling him to save it for Cactus. Mikey jumped off the top rope, nailing Douglas with a somersault plancha into the third row. Cactus grabbed the microphone and told Mikey that he didn't need a chair to beat a never-will-be like Shane Douglas. He said that Douglas was a coward for not facing him before he left for the quote-unquote big time. Cactus said, "Now that you've come crawling back on your hands and knees, let's see who the better man really is." Douglas and Cactus battled briefly until Dreamer tagged in. Dreamer Irish whipped Cactus over a guardrail and waffled him with a Nintendo. A mannequin torso came into play, with Dreamer using it to batter Cactus. Dreamer ran across the ring, baseball sliding a chair into Cactus's face. As Cactus retaliated, Douglas bashed him across the back with a steel chair. Mikey grabbed the chair from Douglas, but was soon the victim of a slingshot atomic drop onto the chair, courtesy of Douglas. Dreamer caught the Nintendo from a fan, only for Mikey to DDT him onto it. Raven interfered, spraying Dreamer in the eyes with hairspray and planting him with an even flow DDT. Blinded by hairspray, Dreamer DDT'd his partner. Cactus made the cover, with Douglas barely kicking out. Douglas bashed Cactus over the head with a chair, only for Cactus to drop toe hold Douglas onto the chair, collapsing it. Cactus made the cover, scoring the pinfall victory, despite claiming earlier that he didn't need a chair to defeat Douglas. The Sandman made his way to the ring with Woman to defend the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Woman seemed annoyed, not cooperating with Sandman during their entrance. Sitting in the corner of the ring was the challenger, Raven, who was curled up with his new unnamed valet. The champion was ruthless, caning Raven a dozen times, swinging wildly to take out the referee in the process. After knocking out Stevie Richards in the Blue Meanie, Raven got a hold of the Singapore cane. Raven bashed Sandman repeatedly, with Dreamer breaking it up and caning Raven profusely. Cactus Jack snuck in, drilling Sandman with a double-arm DDT. This led to a brawl between Dreamer and Cactus around ringside. As the brawl made its way into the aisle, Shane Douglas joined the fray. Back in the ring, Sandman missed a leg drop off the top rope, allowing Raven to spike him with an even flow. Raven scored the pinfall victory to become the new ECW World Heavyweight Champion. With his arm around his valet and his newly won championship around his waist, Raven cut a promo in front of a white wall. He said, "I've got a new girl, I've got the gold, I don't need Beulah, I never did." He trudged away, with his new valet throwing her arms up in disgust. We cut back to footage of the Sandman following his championship loss. Woman was elated, saying that this allowed Sandman to come with her to the big time, WCW. Sandman wasn't sold on the idea, saying he was loyal to ECW. Woman said that she made Sandman and she can break him. Sandman screamed back in her face, with Too Cold Scorpio breaking things up. Scorpio said that they should hear Woman out. Woman and Sandman forced Scorpio to choose whom he'd rather align with. Scorpio teased going with Woman, but ultimately said he'd join the Sandman. After the two embraced, Scorpio said, "Unlike Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko, who walked their ass out the front door, your ass is out the back. And don't let the door hit ya where the good Lord split ya." Scorpio carried Woman away up the aisle, joining Sandman afterward for a beer to end the broadcast. The Big Apple Blizzard Blast took place on February 3rd and saw the debut of Lionheart Chris Jericho, who scored a pinfall victory over Rob Van Dam. Raven cut a promo on the February 6th edition of ECW TV with his new girlfriend. He said he wanted to introduce everyone to his most cherished possession. At that, he pushed the girl out of the frame to reveal his ECW World Heavyweight Championship. The show aired footage from the Big Apple Blizzard Blast, featuring a bout between Rey Mysterio Jr. and Juventud Guerrera. They began with a high-flying back-and-forth sequence, ending with Mysterio leaping off the top rope and hitting Guerrera with a hurricanrana off the apron and to the floor. The action continued, with the two luchadors bringing the fans to their feet. Guerrera attempted to hit a splash mountain off the second rope, but Mysterio reversed it with a big Frankensteiner. This allowed Mysterio to cover Guerrera and score the pinfall victory. Cactus Jack cut a promo in front of the ECW banner with a Mr. Potato Head in his hand. Mikey Whipwreck looked on as Cactus reenacted the night he lost his ear, ripping out the ear of the Mr. Potato Head. Cactus said that Mr. Potato Head can't even wear his glasses because he's hardcore. He said he needed these sessions with Mikey because they help him clear his mind. Cactus said that Mikey has been the only one to stand beside him. He said, "You've been my crutch when I cannot walk. You've been my sunshine when skies are gray. If I asked you nice enough, would you kill somebody for me?" A nervous Mikey said, "I guess so." Cactus asked Mikey if he wanted to team with him to face the Smoking Guns in Madison Square Garden. Mikey said he was happy in ECW, despite Cactus saying he could win them the WWF Tag Team titles. ECW Tag Team Champions Cactus Jack and Mikey Whipwreck defended their titles against the Eliminators. Raven accompanied the champions to the ring, bullying Mikey. Cactus removed his flannel to reveal a shirt that said WWF&F. Every time Mikey would lock in a hold, Cactus would pull him away. Cactus then took the microphone and said that if Mikey wasn't going to help him, then he could leave, saying he won the titles on his own anyway. The Eliminators capitalized on the dissension, pounding on Mikey. Cactus broke a beer bottle and began to inch towards Perry Saturn. Mikey tried to stop him, but Cactus shoved him out of the way. This caused Mikey to drop-kick Cactus from behind, sending the remnants of the bottle flying. Saturn apprehended the bottle and attempted to stab Cactus. Mikey super-kicked Saturn to save his partner, but ultimately got hit with total elimination. Saturn covered Mikey to score the pinfall victory, with the Eliminators becoming the new ECW Tag Team Champions. Raven began to assault Mikey, but Cactus shoved him aside. After saying, "You don't touch him," Cactus turned around and leveled Mikey with a clothesline. Cactus held up Mikey while Raven assaulted him with a chair. Afterward, Cactus hit Mikey with a double-arm DDT onto the chair. As Joey Styles interviewed the new champions, Francine made her way to the ring. She attempted to seduce the Eliminators, only for the Pitbulls to ambush them. Francine helped hang Saturn with a chain, while Cronus was a victim of the Super Bomb. Pitbull number 2 choked Saturn with a steel chain, while Francine began to cut his hair. The show featured a Pulp Fiction montage showing Tommy Dreamer dripping hot candle wax onto his fist. He claimed that physical pain, unlike mental pain, can be blocked out. Cactus Jack talked trash about Mikey Whipwreck, saying he offended him with his love of devil music and Doritos. Cactus then claimed that Vince ordered him to destroy Mikey. With Raven brooding next to him, Cactus said, "What Uncle Vince wants, Uncle Vince gets." JT Smith tried to convince the viewers that he was a true Italian, singing some Dean Martin. Bill Alfonso screamed into the camera about his hatred for New York. Raven claimed that his scars couldn't be seen and that he's always been able to show compassion except to himself. Too Cold Scorpio talked about how he can't resist kissing his girl, so he brought her on screen. The ECW Television Championship. While shaving his head, Perry Saturn said, "Do you really think I care?" The February 13th episode of ECW TV began with Perry Saturn shaving his head while John Cronus giggled in the background. Saturn said, "Pitbulls, now I've eliminated my hair. Now we're gonna eliminate you." Joey Styles attempted to open the show, only to be interrupted by Bill Alfonso and Taz. Alfonso berated 911 for leaving the promotion to sign with WCW. Rey Mysterio Jr. interrupted, saying he wasn't afraid of Taz. Alfonso demanded that Mysterio respect Taz, slapping him. Mysterio spin-kicked Alfonso, but got tossed around by Taz. Despite Mysterio getting a few shots in, Taz suplexed him around with ease. Wrestlers attended to Mysterio, while Taz and Alfonso made their exit. Joey Styles attempted to make an announcement, but was interrupted by Woman. She claimed that despite signing with WCW, she wasn't going anywhere. Woman said they'd have to drag her away, kicking and screaming. Enter Sandman blasted through the speakers, with the Sandman entering the ring, smoking a cigarette and carrying a Singapore cane. Despite constant badgering from Woman to join her, Sandman said, "No, I don't want to come with you." Too Cold Scorpio interrupted and put his arm around Woman. He quickly turned on her and carried her out of the building and into the snow. Scorpio threw Woman into her limo and slammed the door shut. Back in the ring, Stevie Richards confronted Sandman, saying that he was sent by Raven. Richards said that Raven was allowing Sandman to back out of his rematch for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Sandman said he's never backed down from a fight. As the crowd urged Sandman to attack Richards and the Meanie, Richards said he was giving Sandman another chance to back out, or he'd Stevie kick him. Meanie said he'd do it, only for Sandman to cane him over the head. Sandman told Richards to deliver a message. He's coming back for his title. As Richards panicked, Raven made his way to the ring with his valet. Raven called Richards a moron and smacked him across the face repeatedly. He scolded Richards for not reminding Beulah to take her birth control daily. Richards begged for Raven to stop hitting him and introduced a surprise for the champion. After digging through an unconscious Meanie's Daisy Dukes,
Richards held up a folded piece of paper. Richards read the paper, saying he was suing Missy Hyatt for sexual harassment. He said that Hyatt molested him in front of the fans and made him feel uncomfortable in the workplace. Out came Hyatt, who got in Richards' face. Raven confronted Hyatt, saying she had another option, and that's to join the champion. She wasn't impressed, insulting Raven's valet and saying that the champion doesn't measure up. Hyatt accused Raven of having a low sperm count, with an insulted champion backing her into a corner. The Sandman raced in, caning Raven, Richards, and the meanie, who then ran away. Hyatt offered Sandman her managerial services, lighting up his cigarette. Tommy Dreamer and the franchise Shane Douglas faced the ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven and Stevie Richards. Dreamer and Douglas battered Richards, who sported a Razor Ramon shirt and a toothpick behind each ear. While Dreamer and Raven brawled on the floor, Douglas evaded interference from Cactus Jack. Douglas planted Richards with a belly-to-belly suplex and made the cover, but the referee was distracted by the blue meanie. Raven wrapped a chain around his fist, punching Douglas between the eyes and making the cover. Douglas kicked out at 2. The Sandman interfered, waffling everyone with the Singapore King. Raven spiked Douglas with a pile driver, but only gained a 2 count. Richards tagged in, getting his shots in on Douglas before tagging the world champion back in only moments later. Dreamer got the tag and battered both Raven and Richards with a frying pan. Raven grabbed a steel chair, bashing both Douglas and Dreamer. Meanie slowly climbed to the top rope for a moonsault, with Dreamer having enough time to fight off Richards and set him up in place. Moonsaulting through the air, Meanie crashed onto Richards. Raven caught Dreamer off guard with an even flow DDT onto a steel chair, with Douglas breaking a pinfall attempt at 2. Douglas took the fight to Raven on the floor, while Beulah taped a frying pan to Dreamer's boot. Dreamer used the pan to nail Richards with an enziguri and score the pinfall victory. After making quick work of his opponent, Taz called out 911. Commissioner Todd Gordon marched to the ring, saying that 911 had left the building. This was all the ammo Bill Alfonso needed, tearing apart both 911 and Gordon over the microphone. Gordon entered the ring, accepting Alfonso's challenge. Alfonso got the first shot, punching Gordon in the nose to knock him to the mat. Gordon charged at Alfonso with a clothesline, pounding on him until Taz broke things up. Taz pummeled Gordon until Bam Bigelow made a shocking appearance to send Taz and Alfonso running away. Bigelow dared Taz to suplex the Beast from the East. The February 20th edition of ECW TV featured footage from CyberSlam 96, with Joey Styles in the ring, welcoming the fans to the show. Suddenly, the lights went out, with the crowd erupting with excitement as the lights turned on to reveal the loose cannon, Brian Pillman. A shocked Styles asked Pillman why he was there, with the loose cannon giving the sarcastic response of, "Haven't you heard?" Pillman said, "I just had an announcer in Atlanta, Georgia, take away my constitutional rights. I have been fired by Eric Bischoff." As the crowd booed, Pillman said, "He's a pretty popular guy." He's a pretty popular guy with my legal department as well. Pillman riled up the crowd and snarled into the microphone, saying, "You can't take away my constitutional rights, 'cause I'm in Philadelphia, where the Constitution was written." He called Bischoff a 90s whiz kid and a former coffee gopher for Vern Gagne. Pillman continued blasting Bischoff, gaining a great response from the crowd. Styles tried to close the interview, but Pillman hijacked the microphone. He insulted the fans by calling them smart marks. Pillman said, "A mark is a guy that pays his last $20 on crack cocaine. A mark is a guy that believes that OJ didn't do it. And a mark is each and every one of you." He said he was going to do the only appropriate thing he should do, threatening to urinate in the ring. Just as Pillman unzipped his jeans, ECW Commissioner Todd Gordon and Paul E. Dangerously ran to the ring, with Shane Douglas in tow. Both Gordon and Dangerously said that this wasn't part of the deal, with Pillman saying, "I do whatever I want, whenever I want." Pillman got in Dangerously's face and said he didn't care about him or his smart marks, calling him Booker Man. After some banter, Gordon called for security, who escorted Pillman out of the ring. A wild Pillman broke free and spit at a fan, pulling him over the guardrail by the hair and tossing him into the ring. Pillman pulled a fork out of his boot and began to stab the fan. Douglas rushed into the ring, with Pillman retreating up the aisle with security in tow. After several calm minutes, security rushed Pillman out from the entrance and escorted him out the front door. In front of the ECW banner, an irate Bill Alfonso cut a promo, backed by Taz. Alfonso said that they were going to send Rey Mysterio Jr. flying back to Mexico with a broken wing. He then screamed at Bam Bigelow, saying that this is he and Taz's territory. Alfonso said that this wasn't WWF, even though he loves Vince McMahon for paying to send him to the Betty Ford Clinic. He said that Taz has shocked the wrestling world by dropping people on their heads. Alfonso said, "I'm making a little more money now, Jack. I'm driving a bigger car, I'm eating steak, and I go to massage parlors every day." Taz interrupted, saying, "Mysterio, Bigelow, stay in your own promotions, 'cause this one's mine." Sporting a Superman shirt, Super Stevie Richards teamed with the ECW Tag Team Champions, the Eliminators, to battle the Pitbulls and Francine in a triple dog collar match. Immediately, Richards knocked out Francine with a Stevie kick to begin a wild brawl around the arena. They battled to the stage, where John Kronus assisted Perry Saturn in moonsaulting off the Eagle's Nest and crashing onto Pitbull number 2. Back in the ring, Pitbull number 1 nailed a Frankensteiner on Kronus off the top rope. Soon after, the Eliminators dragged Francine to her feet, preparing her for total elimination until Pitbull number 1 tackled her out of harm's way. The Pitbulls planted Saturn with the super bomb off the top rope. Kronus suffered the same fate, with Richards taking one worse. Instead, Richards was spiked with a super pile driver in a brutal moment. Francine crawled onto Richards and scored the pinfall victory. The Eliminators were furious, hitting total elimination on each member of the Pitbulls. Taking it to the extreme, the Eliminators nailed Francine with total elimination. With a separated shoulder, Tommy Dreamer made his way to the ring with Beulah by his side. They joined Joey Styles for an interview, only to be interrupted by the ECW World Heavyweight Champion, Raven, Stevie Richards, the Blue Meanie, and the now-named Komona Wanalaya. Raven said that the separated shoulder he gave Dreamer was only the beginning of his revenge. He said, "In China, if you're caught stealing, they cut off your hands. In Indonesia, if you're caught running from the police, they cut off your feet. In Thailand, if you're caught lying, they cut off your tongue. You got my girlfriend pregnant, so you know what your punishment's going to be?" With things getting tense, Shane Douglas and the Bruise Brothers backed up Dreamer. Raven said, "Prepare to die," and extended his arms. At that, the Bruise Brothers ambushed Dreamer. They pulled him repeatedly by the legs, crotch first, into the steel ring post. Raven led his entourage away, with Dreamer left in agonizing pain. The February 27th edition of ECW TV featured fan cam footage of the franchise Shane Douglas challenging Raven for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Brian Pillman marched to the ring with a press pass around his neck, snapping a camera. As Douglas made the cover, Pillman snapped a photo in the face of the franchise. Douglas became irate, with security stepping between Pillman and the franchise. Pillman took more photos during the ruckus until he was dragged away by security. Cactus Jack wore a button-down shirt, sports jacket, and a tie to compete against the franchise Shane Douglas. Serving as the referee was Mark Hildebrand, who had trained with both competitors at Dominic DeNucci's wrestling school. Douglas ripped the suit off of Cactus, battering him both in the ring and on the floor. The franchise dove off the top rope, dropping a double axe handle onto Cactus on the floor. Douglas reversed a suplex, dropping Cactus spine first onto a guardrail. He again dove off the top rope with a high cross body, landing on Cactus in the third row. Back in the ring, Cactus gained the advantage, clawing at the franchise and attacking his knee. On the floor, Cactus flipped the timekeeper's table onto Douglas, following it up by dropping an elbow onto him. Cactus hawked a loogie into the air, catching it in a disgusting display that got a pop from the fans in the ECW arena. Back in the ring, Cactus caught Douglas with a drop toe hold, face first onto a steel chair. Cactus then planted Douglas with a pile driver, with the franchise barely kicking out at 2. The keen eye of Joey Styles saw the referee pass Douglas a foreign object. Douglas bashed Cactus across the side of the head with the foreign object, which was soon revealed to be handcuffs. He cuffed Cactus's arms behind him and said, "That's it." Douglas clobbered Cactus repeatedly over the head with brutal, unprotected chair shots. The franchise offered Cactus the opportunity to quit, with Cactus calling out for Vince. Cactus refused to give up, even calling for Mikey Whipwreck to save him. Mikey came to the scene, turning on Cactus by waffling him with a chair. This allowed Douglas to score a pinfall victory on Cactus to settle their score. Shane Douglas kicked off a Pulp Fiction montage, writing on a chalkboard. First, he told Cactus to say hello to Vince for him. Second, he addressed Brian Pillman, taking umbrage with him using the name The Loose Cannon. Third, Douglas called himself the personification of a loose cannon, with clips shown of his past antics. He said, "The man with no ethics drives the hardest bargain." Douglas talked about Dreamer asking him to protect him and Beulah. He talked about turning on Dreamer, saying that it was a lesson hard-earned. Dreamer responded, saying that he's a marked man. He said, "You can take my manhood, you can take my career, you can take my life, but you can never get my girl or my kid. Quote the Dreamer, nevermore."
The March 5th episode of ECW TV saw Brian Pillman get into a physical altercation with a giant pencil, a metaphor for his reputation for butting heads with the bookers of wrestling promotions. Footage aired from SiberSlam, with the ECW television champion Too Cold Scorpio defending his title against Sabu. Starting strong, Sabu attacked Scorpio with a chair and threw him into the crowd. In a death-defying scene, Sabu leaped over a chair, launched himself off the top rope, and dove onto a wary Scorpio in the front row. They battled back into the ring, where Scorpio drilled Sabu with a powerbomb. The two continued to battle back and forth, hitting big moves and battling over a steel chair. Multiple near falls would follow until Sabu took the fight back to the floor. Sabu hit a springboard moonsault onto Scorpio, shattering his kneecaps on the steel guardrail. A wounded Sabu set up the timekeeper's table in the crowd and laid Scorpio out on it. Sabu set a chair up in the ring, launched himself off it onto the ropes, and hit a somersault off the top rope. Scorpio moved, with Sabu crashing through the table. Scorpio brought the fight back into the ring, where numerous pinfall attempts ensued. Sabu attempted a Frankensteiner off the top rope, while Scorpio tried a 450 splash, but neither could finish the match. In the final seconds, Sabu hit a slingshot somersault leg drop with a chair onto Scorpio, but he failed to score the pinfall victory. Seconds later, the 30-minute time limit expired, with the match declared a draw. A Pulp Fiction montage aired, beginning with the Pitbulls voicing their disgust for the Bruise Brothers turning on Tommy Dreamer. Missy Hyatt seduced the Sandman, saying she wanted him to hurt Stevie Richards. Sandman said, "What mommy wants, mommy gets." Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie deemed themselves as the second coming of the Fantastics, complete with the Fargo strut. Dances with Dudley interrupted, saying that Meanie could take a few dance lessons from Bubba Ray Dudley. Bubba and Meanie stared at one another as if they were looking into a mirror. Brian Pillman smoked a cigar in the back of a limo with his lawyer, C. Elliot Pollock, looking over his contract. The segment cut back to Meanie dancing to Bubba beatboxing. Brian Pillman appeared naked on a couch, saying he's been stripped of all his human rights by Eric Bischoff. However, Pillman said that the greatest gift Bischoff gave him was the freedom to be himself. Pillman pointed to a painting of playing cards and said, "You've given me the ace." Cactus Jack had his farewell match on March 9th at the Big Ass Extreme Bash, facing Mikey Whipwreck. Cactus dominated, kicking Mikey around ringside. Fans attempted to hand Cactus weapons, but he threw them all aside. Mikey gained the advantage, hitting a cactus-like clothesline to Jack, over the ropes and to the floor. Cactus regained the advantage and hit a belly-to-back suplex on Mikey onto the timekeeper's table, which didn't budge on impact. Afterward, Cactus dropped an elbow off the second rope onto Mikey on the floor. The ever-resilient Mikey took the fight into the crowd, bruising Cactus before hitting a dive onto him off the top rope. Cactus turned the tables, suplexing Mikey onto the concrete floor. Back in the ring, Cactus attempted to put away Mikey with a double-arm DDT, only for Mikey to kick out just before the 3 count. Cactus attempted a pile driver on Mikey onto the floor. Mikey reversed it, backdropping Cactus into the front row. Capitalizing, Cactus hit a neckbreaker on Mikey onto a steel guardrail. Cactus launched himself off the ropes and onto Mikey on the floor. Mikey moved, with Cactus crashing onto the guardrail. Back in the ring, Mikey clobbered Cactus repeatedly over the head with a steel chair. A fan threw a Leonard Cohen album into the ring, which Cactus grabbed and tried to escape with through the crowd. Mikey chased after Cactus, suplexing him on the floor and climbing onto the commentary stage. He leaped off, crashing onto Cactus below. On commentary, Joey Styles said, "Nobody should jump that far without wearing a parachute." The two brawled back to the ring, where Cactus planted Mikey with a pile driver in the center of the ring. Cactus covered Mikey and scored the pinfall victory. The fans gave Cactus a standing ovation. Cactus helped Mikey to his feet and hugged him. Frank Sinatra's New York, New York played for Cactus as the fans waved their arms and sang along. Cactus took the microphone and said, "This is one screwed up place." He said that leaving the ECW arena was harder than suing Uncle Eric. Cactus praised the ECW locker room as well as his biggest fan, John, whom he gave his shirt to. Finally, Cactus wanted to personally thank the two people that he considers the lifeblood of ECW. He asked those two men to come to the ring, Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie. Cactus then personally thanked Paul E. Dangerously before doing the Fargo strut up the aisle with Stevie and the Meanie. The March 12th episode of ECW TV featured footage from the first night of the Big Ass Extreme Bash. Joey Styles introduced the franchise Shane Douglas, who said, "Shawn Michaels, kiss my ass." Meanwhile, the loose cannon Brian Pillman sat in the front row, irate and provoking Douglas. Despite this, Styles attempted to convince Douglas it wasn't worth giving Pillman the time of day. It wasn't convincing enough, as Douglas ran out of the ring to confront Pillman. Douglas reeled his fist back, ready to throw a punch. In an act of cowardice, Pillman pulled his cousin in the way, who happened to be holding a crying baby. Douglas nearly struck the child, but was able to stop himself. With Styles going ballistic, Douglas said the famous words, "Put the baby down." Pillman accused Douglas of being a quitter and said, "I'm a real man. I don't quit. I get thrown out of town." Pillman reached over his cousin and pie-faced Douglas. A melee broke out, with a slew of officials having to restrain Douglas. Security physically tossed Pillman out the front door, with Douglas seething at ringside. Douglas begged for security to let Pillman back in, with Commissioner Todd Gordon ordering Douglas to return to the locker room. As Douglas made his exit, Bill Alfonso made his way to the ring to confront Gordon. Alfonso criticized Gordon's promoting skills and then slapped him across the face. Gordon attacked Alfonso until Taz ran in to make the save. Alfonso proceeded to waffle Gordon across the back with a steel chair. Bam Bigelow made his debut, only for Taz to bash him with a chair. Bigelow didn't budge, causing Taz and Alfonso to retreat. From the locker room, Bill Alfonso voiced his disgust for Bam Bigelow. Taz stood in the background as Alfonso revealed that the root of his hatred comes from Bigelow's match against Lawrence Taylor. Alfonso said that he lost a lot of money on Bigelow's loss. He said, "If you can't beat Lawrence Taylor, Bam Bam, what makes you think you can beat my man Taz?" The Gangstas cut a promo from a stairwell, with New Jack commenting on his surprise return, saying he made bail. Hailing from the so-called most hardcore place known to all mankind, Stamford, Connecticut, Cactus Jack was in action against Chris Jericho. Before the start, Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie asked Cactus to be an honorary member of the Fabulous Ones. The three proceeded to do the Fargo strut together until Jericho broke things up. This angered Cactus, who yelled at Jericho, saying they weren't hurting anybody. They battled back and forth, with Jericho fighting off the interference of Richards and the Meanie. Cactus gained the advantage by battering Jericho repeatedly with a steel chair on the floor. He soon suplexed Jericho over a guardrail, with Jericho's knee smashing onto the steel of a guardrail support beam. Back in the ring, Jericho hit Cactus with a Frankensteiner off the top rope. Cactus reversed an Irish whip, spiking Jericho with a piledriver. He clotheslined Jericho over the top rope, launching himself backward off the apron, crashing onto Jericho. Back in the ring, Cactus planted Jericho with another piledriver. Amazingly, Jericho kicked out at 2. Moments later, Jericho hit Cactus with a German suplex and scored the upset victory. Bill Alfonso led Taz to the ring for an encounter with Mikey Whipwreck. Relentless, Mikey threw everything he had at Taz, including a somersault plancha over the top rope and to the floor. Back in the ring, Taz caught Mikey with a belly-to-belly Tazplex over the top rope and to the floor. Mikey shifted the momentum, reversing a T-bone Tazplex to roll up Taz for a 2 count. He missed a high cross body, allowing Taz to dump him on his head with a head and arm Tazplex. Taz locked in the Taz mission, soon winning by submission. After the bell, Taz kept his hold locked in, only breaking it once Bam Bigelow hit the scene. Bigelow got his hands on Alfonso first, hoisting him high in the air. Taz clipped Bigelow's knee and cinched in the Taz mission. Alfonso fended off members of the locker room with a chair, battering anyone that entered the ring. The March 19th episode of ECW TV featured footage from Night 2 of the Big Ass Extreme Bash. Brian Pillman marched to the ring with Philadelphia Eagles player Harry Botswain as his backup and his lawyers in tow. Pillman cleared the ring and demanded that Joey Styles come interview him. A nervous Styles entered the ring, with Pillman professing his love for him. Pillman said that the Rogue Horseman had arrived, and then cut a promo on the franchise Shane Douglas. He said, When I ask the questions and you don't know the answer, you go back to the classroom and quit wasting your time smacking around defenseless 12-year-old students. Douglas interrupted from the balcony, initially saying that he wasn't going to waste his sweat on Pillman. He then said, "The hell I'm not," and marched to the ring. Pillman and his entourage made a quick exit as Douglas entered the ring, demanding a confrontation. Commissioner Todd Gordon led officials to the ring to calm down an irate Douglas. Pillman had purchased airtime during this episode, running an ad for his hotline. The Pitbulls battled the Bruise Brothers, with Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie interfering. Richards caught Francine with a Stevie kick, knocking her unconscious. Tommy Dreamer raced to the ring with his arm in a sling. It was a ruse, as Dreamer removed the fake arm to batter the Bruise Brothers, Meanie, and Richards. Dreamer took the fight to the floor, bashing Meanie and Richards with weapons. After a brutal beating, Richards, Meanie, and the Bruise Brothers retreated, with Dreamer and the Pitbulls left standing tall. Night 2 of the Big Ass Extreme Bash saw a 2 out of 3 falls match between Rey Mysterio Jr. and Juventud Guerrera. After a near stalemate, Guerrera won the first fall with a dragon suplex. Mysterio upped the intensity in the second fall, going so far as to hit a diving hurricanrana on Guerrera off the apron and to the concrete floor. Mysterio followed it up by launching himself off referee Jim Molyneux and hitting a somersault plancha onto Guerrera on the floor. After a Dr. Bomb in the center of the ring, Mysterio scored a pinfall victory to win the second fall. Things got wild in the third fall, beginning with Guerrera hitting an acai moonsault onto Mysterio in the front row. The two traded pinfall attempts in the ring before taking the fight to the floor. Mysterio soared with a springboard somersault plancha onto Guerrera into the second row. The two brawled out the front door and into the parking lot, where Guerrera powerbombed Mysterio onto the hood of a car. Mysterio responded by leaping off the car and nailing Guerrera with a hurricanrana onto the concrete. They battled back into the building and towards the ring, where Mysterio leveled Guerrera with a wild chair shot. Back in the ring, Guerrera gained the advantage and attempted to hit a splash mountain on Mysterio off the second rope. Mysterio reversed it in midair and hit Guerrera with a hurricanrana and then scored the pinfall victory. The fight continued as Mysterio dragged Guerrera on top of the timekeeper's table. Mysterio sent Guerrera crashing through the table with a huge powerbomb. A Pulp Fiction montage aired, with Brian Pillman appearing in a kitchen, dressed as a chef and preparing a salad. The dish was being made for WCW attorney Gary Juster, with Pillman hawking a giant loogie right on top. The franchise Shane Douglas was shown at a carnival with a soap opera star on his arm. Taz screamed, "What about me? What about Taz?" JT Smith responded to his critics that say he's clumsy. He said he was one smart Italiano. The Eliminators bragged about taking out Francine with total elimination. Raven appeared backstage with Komona Wanalea and the Bruise Brothers. Raven said he's only ever loved one thing, Beulah. The segment went back to JT Smith, where the ECW backdrop fell on top of him. The montage ended with a shot of Brian Pillman eating in a fancy restaurant. A waiter approached him for an autograph, which Pillman was happy to do. After signing, the waiter shook Pillman's hand and called him a nice guy. As he left, Pillman said, "It's all a work. I'm not really the loose cannon." Pillman began to stab his arm with a fork and said, "It's all just a perception of reality." The March 26th edition of ECW TV saw Bill Alfonso lead Taz to the ring for a match against Lionheart Chris Jericho. Taz was ruthless, dropping Jericho on his head with a suplex, with referee Jim Molyneux stopping the match. Jericho demanded a restart, with Taz dropping him back on his head with a German Tazplex. Taz locked in the Taz mission, picking up a victory by submission. Despite the bell ringing persistently, Taz kept the submission locked in, with the Eliminators standing guard. Brian Pillman raced into the ring like a maniac, jumping around madly like a pogo stick to taunt Taz. Moments later, Taz suplexed the future Little Guido, with Pillman retreating. El Puerto Ricano raced down the aisle, with Pillman clotheslining him. The franchise Shane Douglas ran down the aisle, with Pillman jumping into the arms of a waiting Harry Botswain, who carried him out the front door. Members of the locker room held back Douglas, engaging in a brief stare-down with Taz, who made a quick exit. ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven limped to the ring on crutches, with Stevie Richards, the Blue Meanie, and Komona Wanalea by his side. The franchise Shane Douglas marched to the ring, angry that his championship opportunity was up in the air. Richards revealed that Raven was suffering from gout and couldn't compete. Douglas wasn't buying it, brutally attacking the leg of Raven. Richards took a cheap shot at Douglas, allowing Raven to hit the even flow, but only getting a 2 count. Raven took the fight to the floor, whipping Douglas against multiple steel guardrails before bashing him with a steel chair. An even flow followed, with Raven driving the head of Douglas onto the concrete floor. Douglas barely answered the 10 count, but soon suplexed Raven on the top turnbuckle and sent him to the floor with a running high knee. The franchise jumped off the top rope, landing on Richards and the Meanie. Back in the ring, Douglas DDT'd Raven onto a steel chair, with Komona breaking the count. Douglas bent Komona over his knee and spanked her, which backfired as she enjoyed it. The franchise kissed Komona and shoved her to the mat, allowing Raven to strike Douglas with a low blow. Raven charged at Douglas with a chair, with the franchise pulling the referee in harm's way. Douglas began to batter Raven with his crutch until he was ambushed by the Blue Meanie and Stevie Richards. Meanie missed a moonsault, with Douglas hitting him, Richards, and Raven with belly-to-belly suplexes. The Bruise Brothers attacked Douglas, allowing Raven to make the cover, with Douglas barely kicking out. The franchise battered the champion, eventually nailing him with an atomic drop onto a steel chair. Still, Douglas couldn't put the champion away. Raven whipped Douglas against a steel chair, and then hit him with an even flow onto another. This was enough to put Douglas away, with Raven squeaking by with a victory. Raven's followers continued the beatdown on Douglas until Tommy Dreamer raced to the ring. This wasn't smart, with Dreamer suffering the same fate as Douglas. The Sandman made his entrance, caning the Bruise Brothers, Richards, Meanie, and Raven. Dreamer planted Raven with a DDT, following it up by wrapping a steel chair around his hurt ankle. As Dreamer raised another chair over his head, Sandman stopped him, saying he wanted to do the honors. Meanwhile, Douglas launched himself off the top rope, crushing Raven's ankle. Douglas prevented Dreamer and the Sandman from colliding by saying, "Remember the deal." As Dreamer retreated, Douglas laughed behind the back of the Sandman. Turning around, Sandman threatened to cane Douglas until Too Cold Scorpio raced in. Scorpio talked sense into the Sandman as the show went off the air. The April 2nd episode of ECW TV saw the Eliminators and the Gangstas engage in a wild brawl around the ECW arena and outside the building. Fighting back to the stage, the Eliminators took out Mustafa with total elimination. Back in the ring, the Eliminators sandwiched New Jack between two tables, taping them together. The Eliminators proceeded to nail New Jack with a brutal total elimination, smashing the tables. Bubba Ray Dudley put up a solid effort in his match against Taz. Ultimately, he fell short, with Taz locking in the Taz mission to win the bout by submission. Taz refused to break the hold until Big Dick Dudley smashed a crutch over his back. While Taz retreated, Bill Alfonso shoved Big Dick Dudley. Alfonso was soon pressed high above Big Dick's head, with Taz attacking the injured knee of Dick to save his manager. Taz ripped the brace off the leg of Big Dick and then wrenched in a leg lace. Big Dick Dudley screamed in pain, with Alfonso waffling Sign Guy over the head with a steel chair to fend him off. The episode featured a Pulp Fiction montage. Dr. Mark Allen stood with the Blue Meanie, who held up an X-ray of a foot. With Bill Alfonso by his side, Taz said when Brian Pillman looked into his eyes, he ran. However, he said that at least Pillman looked into his eyes. The Pitbulls put the tag team division on notice, declaring themselves the Mad Dogs of War. The segment went back to Dr. Allen, who showed an X-ray of Raven's foot. He said that it was his medical opinion that Raven should never wrestle again. Raven said that this was the first time you could see his pain. Missy Hyatt poured beer down the throat of the Sandman, who said, "Make love and war." Joey Styles hyped the ongoing violence between the Eliminators and the Gangstas. The franchise Shane Douglas said to the fans that he was ECW's only hope to take the ECW Championship from Raven. The April 9th episode of ECW TV saw Joey Styles interview Raven's doctor, Dr. Mark Allen. Backed by the ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven, Komona, and the Bruise Brothers, Dr. Allen revealed that he operated on Raven's foot for 6 hours. It took 26 pins, 4 plates, and 32 stainless steel staples to reconstruct Raven's foot. Dr. Allen said that Raven should never wrestle again, but constructed a protective boot in order to continue competing. The Sandman interrupted, saying, "If I can drink a case of beer before I wrestle, he can wrestle with that foot." Raven clobbered Sandman, with the Bruise Brothers picking up the scraps. The franchise Shane Douglas raced to the ring, followed by Tommy Dreamer, who spiked Raven with a pile driver. Dreamer then locked Raven in a figure 4 leg lock, with the champion screaming in pain. Out came the debuting primetime Brian Lee, who waffled Dreamer with a painter's tray. Lee continued his assault until Douglas ran him off, wielding a steel chair. An ad ran for Quagmire's Ribs, which was a charade for Brian Pillman's hotline. Pillman said, "You might find out something you're not supposed to." In six-man tag action, ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven and the Bruise Brothers came to the ring with Komona. Metallica's Enter Sandman played, with the Sandman and Missy Hyatt appearing above the front door. The song switched to Deep Purple's Perfect Strangers, with the franchise Shane Douglas appearing on the broadcast stage. Man in the Box by Alice in Chains played, with Tommy Dreamer and Beulah appearing atop the Eagle's Nest. Stevie Richards ambushed Sandman, bashing him over the head with a chair. Douglas and Dreamer brawled with the Bruise Brothers in the aisle, with Richards and the Blue Meanie continuing their assault on the Sandman. The action made its way to the ring, with the Bruise Brothers dominating. Raven put Dreamer through the timekeeper's table with an elbow drop off the apron. The decimation of Dreamer continued, with Raven and the Bruise Brothers taking their shots. Douglas got the tag, single-handedly fighting off both brothers. Primetime Brian Lee attacked Dreamer, leading to a brawl between the two, up the aisle and through the curtain. Back in the ring, Raven drilled Douglas with a pile driver, only gaining a 2 count. An even flow DDT followed onto a steel chair, with Douglas again kicking out. The Sandman returned, while Douglas and Raven battled over a chair. Sandman tagged in and caned Raven and the Bruise Brothers repeatedly. Dreamer returned, with all 6 participants battling around ringside and into the crowd. One of the Bruise Brothers whipped Douglas aggressively against a door that had been ripped off its hinges. Shortly after, Dreamer dragged the door into the ring, pile-driving Raven on top of it. The Sandman dove off the top rope, landing on Raven with a leg drop. The Bruise Brothers made the save, attacking Sandman, only for Douglas to plant Raven with a belly-to-belly suplex. Meanwhile, the Sandman was crouched against the ring post, with Douglas looking on and doing nothing about it. Instead, Douglas covered Raven and scored the pinfall victory. Just as Raven ordered the Bruise Brothers to crotch Dreamer against a ring post, Beulah jumped onto the champion's back. The Bruise Brothers held up Beulah for Raven, with Komona getting in the way for protection. Raven slapped Komona, with Dreamer charging in with a steel chair. Douglas followed with a second chair, with Raven and the Bruise Brothers retreating to end the broadcast. The massacre on Queens Boulevard took place on April 13th and featured a bout between Sabu and Mikey Whipwreck. The two chain wrestled to kick things off, with Mikey keeping up with every hold. A frustrated Sabu tossed a chair into the ring and began to take his anger out on Mikey. Sabu launched himself off a chair with a splash, with Mikey moving and attempting a splash of his own. Sabu dodged it, keeping his momentum by nailing a picture-perfect triple jump moonsault. He then laid Mikey onto a table that was propped up between the ring and a guardrail. Mikey rolled off, but Sabu still caught him with a double axe handle. Sabu ran across the table, diving onto Mikey in the 4th row. The action continued, with Mikey tossing Sabu out of the ring and through a table on the floor. Mikey dove off the top rope and onto Sabu with a high cross body. With Sabu in the front row, Mikey dove off the ropes, nailing a somersault plancha. Once in the ring, Sabu regained the advantage, hitting numerous big moves, but failing to get the victory. Mikey soon found himself laid out on a table in the front row. Sabu launched himself off a chair, flipping off the top rope with a somersault plancha. Mikey moved, and Sabu crashed through the table. Mikey frantically tried to score a pinfall, with Sabu repeatedly kicking out. Sabu was soon the victim of a bulldog off the top rope. Mikey attempted another onto a chair, but Sabu wiggled free and clobbered Mikey over the head with the chair. Racing across the ring, Sabu launched himself off the chair and hit a Frankensteiner off the top rope on Mikey. This was enough to keep Mikey down, with Sabu squeaking by with a victory. Sabu shook Mikey's hand, with the crowd giving them a standing ovation. The April 16th edition of ECW TV featured footage from the massacre on Queens Boulevard. We saw the debut of Devon Dudley, who aided his half-brother Bubba Ray in taking out the FBI. After winning an enhancement match, the ECW Tag Team Champions, the Eliminators, called out the Gangstas. It didn't take long for the Gangstas to race to the ring with weapons, and a wild brawl ensued. Members of the locker room raced to the ring to separate both teams. New Jack ended up punching a police officer, leading to his arrest. The ECW World Heavyweight Champion, Raven, made his way to the ring with Stevie Richards, the Blue Meanie, and Komona Wanalea. An unnamed female fan jumped into the ring and began making out with Meanie. She proceeded to lick whipped cream off Meanie's belly. Raven broke things up and then senselessly slapped Komona across the face. Richards followed Raven's lead, stomping on her. Tommy Dreamer and the Pitbulls battled Primetime Brian Lee and the Bruise Brothers in a wild brawl. The action spilled throughout the arena and outside the building. Back in the ring, Lee sandwiched Dreamer's head between two chairs, with each Bruise Brother striking a chair with a big boot. Lee scored the pinfall victory, but the action continued. Dreamer and Raven brawled, leading to Dreamer spiking Raven with a DDT. The Pitbulls sent Raven through a table by super bombing Dreamer on top of him. A Pulp Fiction montage aired, with Shane Douglas hyping his upcoming match with Raven. Bill Alfonso cut a promo on the fans, saying that Taz is the only one allowed to call him Fonzie. JT Smith continued to prove he's a true Italian. Brian Lee provoked Tommy Dreamer, who appeared next, headbutting a locker until he was bloody. Shane Douglas promised that the truth would be told at the Hostile City Showdown. Komona Wanalea claimed that she was going to expose the biggest scandal in wrestling history. Raven cried under a stairway, saying that Komona was going to cost him the ECW championship. However, he said there was one saving grace. Komona's secret would hurt Tommy Dreamer more. Raven laughed maniacally to end the broadcast. The Hostile City Showdown took place on April 20th at the ECW Arena. ECW World Heavyweight Champion Raven made his way to the ring with Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie. his opponent was the franchise Shane Douglas, who claimed to have some juicy information. He was joined by Komona Wanalea, who claimed to have news that would rip the lid off of professional wrestling. Shane started by telling Raven that while Beulah was cheating on him with Tommy Dreamer, she was also cheating with someone else. Dreamer made his way to the ring in search of answers. Douglas revealed that Beulah wasn't really pregnant. Dreamer grit his teeth at Shane and said, "Who is he?" While Douglas laughed, Komona grabbed the microphone and said, "It's me." Beulah made her way to the ring and began to passionately make out with Komona. Dreamer separated them and said, "I'll take 'em both, I'm hardcore." The trio kissed and left the ring together. The main event officially began with Raven and Douglas battling through the crowd. Douglas took a cheese grater to the forehead of Raven, slicing him open. They brawled out the front door and outside the building before heading back to the ring. Brian Lee interfered, only for Dreamer to attack him. This distracted the referee, who failed to see Douglas pinning Raven after a belly-to-belly suplex. Douglas was irate, jaw-jacking with Dreamer. As they shook hands, Douglas nailed Dreamer with a belly-to-belly suplex. Dreamer and Douglas then brawled, with the locker room emptying to separate them. The match continued in the ring with a slew of pinfall attempts. Douglas locked Raven in a figure-4 leg lock. The Blue Meanie soared off the top rope with a moonsault, only for Douglas to roll out of the way. Stevie Richards managed to nail Douglas with a Stevie kick, but Raven couldn't score a pinfall. Douglas ripped off the orthopedic boot of Raven and locked him in the figure-4. One of the Bruise Brothers interfered, but Douglas took him out with a belly-to-belly suplex. Raven then waffled Douglas with the orthopedic boot and capitalized with a pinfall victory to retain his title. Following the match, Too Cold Scorpio confronted Douglas, claiming that the ECW television title was more important than the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Scorpio went on to challenge Douglas to face him. Douglas responded, saying the ECW television title meant nothing to him. It was a ruse, with Douglas attacking Scorpio from behind and then whipping him with the championship. Sandman rushed in, only to get hit with a belly-to-belly suplex. Douglas clobbered both Sandman and Scorpio with a Singapore cane. The franchise then pile-drove Scorpio onto the television title before making his exit. The April 23rd edition of ECW TV featured footage from the Hostile City Showdown. Things kicked off with the Gangstas calling out the Eliminators, leading to a violent brawl. The locker room emptied to separate the two teams in a chaotic scene. Later, the Eliminators interrupted a match, destroying the participants and calling out the Gangstas. Out came the Gangstas, with the two teams again brawling. They battled through the crowd and around ringside, mercilessly bashing one another with various foreign objects. Members of the locker room separated the two teams, with JT Smith asking why both teams can't be paisans. Smith began to sing Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon, with Devon Dudley swinging a chair to break things up. After Devon chased Smith and Little Guido away, the brawling continued. JT Smith brought his fellow FBI member, Little Guido, to his favorite place in Philadelphia to get a cheesesteak, Gino's. Guido complained that the sandwich was just alright, with Smith getting bent out of shape, asking Guido why he has to be so rude. They ended up kissing one another on the cheeks and calling each other paisans. Tommy Dreamer was in action against primetime Brian Lee. Before the bout, Lee pledged his allegiance to Raven. Dreamer and Lee brawled mercilessly from the get-go, quickly taking the fight into the crowd. Brawling all around the arena, Dreamer went airborne, leaping off the eagle's nest onto Lee below. Lee dragged Dreamer back to ringside and dropped a guardrail onto him, repeatedly driving it into his midsection. With the referee knocked out, the Bruise Brothers made their way to the ring to attack Dreamer. They sandwiched Dreamer's head between two chairs and big booted them from each side. With a cinder block set up on Dreamer's crotch, Lee swung a chair violently, hammering the cinder block onto Dreamer. Lee covered Dreamer and scored the pinfall victory. The April 30th edition of ECW TV featured a Pulp Fiction montage. The Gangstas bragged that they got a hold of the Eliminators tag team titles and spray painted them. As they left the building, the Gangstas were ambushed by the Eliminators, who beat them down and spray painted their backs.
The May 7th episode of ECW TV featured footage from the Hostile City Showdown, with Sabu facing Rob Van Dam. RVD began the match, showcasing his thunderous kicks and aerial offense. Sabu was ferocious, gaining the advantage and wrenching at RVD's limbs. He followed it up by drop-kicking RVD off the top rope into the arena floor. Brawling on the floor, RVD hopped atop a guardrail, only for Sabu to shove him off it and into the third row. Sabu set up a chair in the ring, launching himself off of it onto the top rope and dove onto RVD in the front row. From there, Sabu bridged a table between the ring and a guardrail. It didn't come into play yet, as RVD somersaulted off the apron with a chair in hand, crashing down onto Sabu. Back in the ring, RVD attempted to force Sabu into submission to no avail. With Sabu on the floor, RVD set up a chair in the ring. He leaped over it, clearing the ropes, and nailed Sabu with a somersault plancha. RVD climbed to the top rope, only for Sabu to catch up to him. Sabu was shoved off the top rope, crashing through the table on the floor. Shockingly, Sabu got up and wrestled RVD onto a second table. It took 2 attempts, but Sabu put RVD through the table with a somersault leg drop. Back in the ring, the two frantically tried to pin one another unsuccessfully. Sabu hit a brutal DDT on RVD off the top rope, driving him headfirst onto the mat. This still wasn't enough to put RVD away. Sabu then hit a triple jump moonsault onto RVD, covering him for a pinfall victory. Following the bout, Sabu attempted to shake RVD's hand. RVD walked past Sabu and up the aisle in the ultimate sign of disrespect. A matter of respect took place on May 11th in the ECW arena. Sabu and RVD battled in a respect match, meaning the loser would have to shake the winner's hand. The brawling began from the get-go, battling around ringside. In the ring, Sabu straddled RVD on the middle rope, laying his head on a steel chair. Sabu hit a leg drop off the top rope onto RVD, smashing the back of his head onto the chair. They transitioned into some mat wrestling until Sabu reversed a hammerlock and connected with a springboard DDT on RVD. With RVD in the front row, Sabu hit a triple jump splash, only for RVD to toss a steel chair at his face. RVD followed it up by setting up 2 chairs in the ring, leaping over them and connecting with a somersault plancha onto Sabu. They battled back and forth, with Sabu crotching RVD on the top rope. Sabu launched himself off a chair and onto the top rope, only for RVD to make him lose his balance and get crotched on the top rope. RVD hit a Frankensteiner on Sabu to the mat below. With a chair set up on Sabu's face, RVD nailed a springboard guillotine leg drop onto him on the ring apron. Sabu battled back and hit a sunset flip on RVD onto the concrete floor. Sabu set up a table in the crowd, laying RVD onto it. In a death-defying moment, Sabu raced across the ring, launched himself off a chair and the top rope, and put RVD through the table with a big splash. Back in the ring, RVD hit a Fisherman's Buster on Sabu off the top rope, spiking him head first onto the canvas. Sabu battled back and spiked RVD with a DDT off the top rope. Sabu hit a triple jump moonsault, only to land on the knees of RVD. RVD hit a second Fisherman's Buster on Sabu off the top rope, with Sabu shockingly kicking out. RVD followed it up with a split-legged moonsault to score the pinfall victory. Paul E. Dangerously came to the ring to check on Sabu and praise his efforts. Sabu grabbed the microphone, extended his hand to RVD, and said, "Respect." RVD slapped his hand away and said he didn't respect Sabu. As RVD left, he met up with Bill Alfonso in the aisle and shook his hand. Taz stood in the aisle with his eyes locked on Sabu. The May 14th edition of ECW TV featured footage from A Matter of Respect. ECW World Television Champion Too Cold Scorpio defended his title against the franchise Shane Douglas in the ECW arena. The match began at a slow pace, with both men jockeying for position. Douglas introduced a chair, gaining the advantage. He then hit a modified springboard suplex, bouncing Scorpio off the ropes from the floor and tossing him into a guardrail. They brawled through the crowd, with Scorpio breaking a wooden crutch over Douglas's back. Douglas came back with a big powerbomb on Scorpio onto the concrete floor. Scorpio battled back, hitting a moonsault off the apron onto Douglas. Soon after, Scorpio rolled back in the ring and nailed Douglas with a super kick, followed by a moonsault. Opting not to go for the pin, Scorpio nailed a 450 splash onto Douglas. The two battled back and forth, each attempting pinfalls, but to no avail. Scorpio attempted a Frankensteiner off the top rope, but Douglas reversed it into a super powerbomb. Shortly after, Douglas nailed Scorpio with a belly-to-belly suplex off the top rope to score the pinfall victory and become the new ECW television champion. Douglas got on the microphone, praising the locker room and declaring Scorpio the best in the world. The two shook hands, with Douglas then asking Scorpio to strap the title around his waist. Instead, Scorpio waffled Douglas with the title and drilled him with a pile driver. He then set a chair up on Douglas's face and hit a leg drop off the top rope before leaving the ring. A Pulp Fiction montage began with Missy Hyatt pressed up against the Sandman, who cracked open a beer and dedicated it to the recently departed Ray the Crippler Stevens. The Dudleys stood around dances with Dudley, who claimed he couldn't walk anymore. That is until Bubba dropped change, and Dances with picked it up off the ground with ease. Meanwhile, Devon seethed in the background. Beulah apologized to Tommy Dreamer for lying to him. He said he should be mad, but instead he made out with Komona. The franchise Shane Douglas said that he was seeking revenge on Too Cold Scorpio, while the Gangstas said they were coming for the Eliminators. On the May 21st edition of ECW TV, the ECW fan cam caught up with Paul E. Dangerously in the parking lot. Dangerously said that Sabu's neck hasn't been the same since it was broken by Chris Benoit. Only 3 people knew the extent of the injuries: Sabu, Paul, and an unnamed third party. Dangerously hypothesized that the unnamed person must have told RVD to target Sabu's neck. In the next segment, Bill Alfonso said that Taz is the unnamed third party. Taz told Fonzie, and Fonzie told RVD to attack the neck. Too Cold Scorpio made his way to the ring to face the human suplex machine, Taz. Just as the match began, the franchise Shane Douglas clobbered Scorpio over the back of the head with the ECW Television Championship, knocking him out. Taz hit Scorpio with a German Tazplex and locked in the Taz mission for a submission victory. Victorious, Taz stood over Scorpio, saying that he waited 10 months to choke him out. Taz mocked Sabu, pointing in the air and saying that the longer Sabu made him wait, the more vicious his beatdowns would be. The episode featured a Pulp Fiction montage. Bubba Ray Dudley drove around an empty parking lot with the rest of his half-brothers stuffed in there with him. Devon was less than pleased with Bubba's driving skills, making him stop the car to chase him around the parking lot. The May 28th edition of ECW TV saw Joey Styles interview the ECW World Heavyweight Champion, Raven, who was backed by primetime Brian Lee, Stevie Richards, and the Blue Meanie. Raven claimed that he knew that Komona and Beulah were having an affair. He said that he got with Komona so that he could be with Beulah in spirit. Raven ordered Richards to find him the skankiest woman he could muster up. In the main event, Tommy Dreamer teamed with the Gangstas to face the ECW Tag Team Champions, the Eliminators, and Brian Lee. It was all-out warfare, with garbage cans full of weapons strewn about the ring. Chaos ensued, with brawling taking place in the crowd and around ringside. Dreamer and Lee battled deep into the crowd, with Saturn and Mustafa close behind. They congregated onto the Eagle's Nest, where Lee suplexed Dreamer through a table and then tossed him off the stage. The Gangstas and the Eliminators brawled at ringside, with Mustafa bashing John Kronus with a Turbo Man action figure. Back in the ring, Dreamer set up Lee for a pile driver onto a steel chair. Stevie Richards snuck in, nailing Dreamer with a Stevie kick to the back of the head. Beulah and Komona made their way to ringside and took turns violently squeezing Stevie's testicles. Dreamer placed a cinder block on the crotch of Lee and smashed it with a steel chair. Before Dreamer could score the pin, Saturn ambushed him and nailed a big pile driver. Dreamer recovered, hitting Saturn with a DDT off the top rope and through a table. New Jack dove off the top rope, smashing a chair onto Saturn. This was enough for New Jack to score the pinfall victory for his team. The June 4th edition of ECW TV featured footage from Fight the Power, which took place days earlier in the ECW arena. Joey Styles introduced the ECW World Heavyweight Champion, Raven, who had Stevie Richards in tow. Richards introduced the woman he'd found for Raven, Divine Brown, who was the escort that was caught with actor Hugh Grant. Raven wasn't interested, saying she hasn't been with enough people yet. After winning a shoot fight, Taz felt invincible and dared anybody to face him. UFC fighter the Polar Bear Paul Varlins answered the call, hopping the guardrail, with wrestlers and security keeping him away from Taz. As security escorted Varlins away, Taz said, "Keep walking." Taz stood on the second rope and called himself the Ultimate Fighter. Tommy Dreamer and the Pitbulls battled primetime Brian Lee and the Bruise Brothers in a six-man tag elimination match that spilled into the crowd and around the ECW arena. Pitbull number 1 was the first to be eliminated, with Lee making the pinfall. Dreamer dove off the Eagle's Nest, putting Lee through a table on the stage below. After Dreamer climbed back up to the balcony, he was ambushed by Raven, who planted him with an even flow DDT. Lee chokeslammed Dreamer off the balcony and through 2 stacked tables below. Somehow, Dreamer made his way back to ringside, planting one of the Bruise Brothers with a DDT on the concrete floor to score a pinfall and an elimination. Back in the ring, Dreamer set Lee up on a table and then prepared to get super bombed off the top rope. The remaining Bruise Brother pulled Lee off the table, with Dreamer crashing through it. Lee covered Dreamer to score an elimination. The remaining Bruise Brother charged at Pitbull number 2 with a big boot. Pitbull number 2 ducked, with Lee taking a boot to the face. This allowed Pitbull number 2 to score a pinfall on Lee for an elimination. Pitbull number 2 then rolled up the Bruise Brother and scored the final pinfall to win the match. Raven said that Pitbull number 2 would receive his World Heavyweight Championship match right then. The champion drilled Pitbull number 2 with a pile driver and made the cover, but only got a 2 count. Raven sent Pitbull number 2 crashing through a piece of a table and made the cover. Pitbull number 2 again kicked out. With the chair in hand, Pitbull number 2 leaped off the top rope, only for Raven to drop kick the chair into his face. Raven hit an even flow onto a chair, following it up with a running boot to the head. The champion made the cover and scored the pinfall victory. The June 11th edition of ECW TV featured the contract signing between Taz and UFC fighter the Polar Bear, Paul Varlins. With things official, it was announced that the shoot fight would take place at Hardcore Heaven 96. A bout between the Dudleys and the FBI came to a screeching halt as Devon Dudley laid out his brothers with a steel chair. Big Dick Dudley made his way through the crowd and flipped the timekeeper's table, with Devon retreating. More footage aired from Fight the Power, with Rob Van Dam facing Mikey Whipwreck. During the bout, the recently injured Brian Pillman emerged from the entrance, rolling down the aisle in a wheelchair. Mikey was less than pleased, even approaching Pillman and slapping him in the face for provoking him. Pillman smashed a wooden crutch over Mikey's back, with RVD joining in on the beatdown. RVD scored the pinfall victory after a Van Daminator. Joey Styles went to ringside to interview Pillman, who insulted the fans and proclaimed RVD as the savior of ECW. As the fans booed Pillman, RVD wheeled him away. Paul E. Dangerously cut a promo saying that Taz tipped off Rob Van Dam about the compressed vertebrae in Sabu's neck. Despite this, he said that Sabu was going to kick RVD's ass at Hardcore Heaven 96. The ECW television champion, the franchise Shane Douglas, made his way to the ring, dragging the belt and kicking it around. Too Cold Scorpio was in the hospital with a staph infection, leaving the champion without an opponent. Douglas ran the gauntlet, defeating El Puerto Ricano, Don E. Allen, Devon Storm, and Mikey Whipwreck. The final opponent was Pitbull number 2, whom Douglas had to taunt to take the match by insulting Francine. An angry Francine hit Douglas, causing the franchise to plant her with a belly-to-belly suplex. Pitbull number 2 was fierce, hitting Douglas with a super bomb to score a pinfall victory to become the new television champion. The episode featured a Pulp Fiction montage, beginning with Shane Douglas storming the broadcast booth, now wanting the ECW television championship. Stevie Richards insulted Divine Brown by attempting to pay for her services. Brown smacked him and walked away. Bill Alfonso stood in a hot tub, inviting a group of women onto his boat. They said yes, but called him Fonzie, with an angry Alfonso canceling the plans. Tommy Dreamer and Brian Lee each hyped their upcoming weapons match at Hardcore Heaven. The June 18th edition of ECW TV saw Stevie Richards come to the ring dressed as Lord Stevie Regal, with the Blue Meanie dressed as Jeeves. Richards confronted Missy Hyatt, who accompanied the Sandman to the ring. He served Hyatt with papers, slipping the summons between her breasts for a sexual harassment suit. Raven's doctor, Dr. Mark Allen, entered the ring, revealing he also treats Sandman and wasn't happy to see him competing with an injured leg. The Sandman interrupted Dr. Allen, ordering Missy to make out with the doctor to keep him quiet. Missy made out with Allen, who made a quick exit once Sandman started swinging the Singapore cane. Richards caught Sandman with a Stevie kick to the injured leg. He then locked Sandman in a figure 4 leg lock. Missy passed the Singapore cane to the Sandman, who used it to bash Richards over the head repeatedly. The meanie ran in, with Hyatt catching up to him and clobbering him with a second cane. Richards lunged with a Stevie kick, only for Sandman to strike first with a cane shot. Staggering to his feet, Richards caught Sandman with a Stevie kick. Richards went for a figure 4, with Sandman rolling him up for the 3 count. A bloody ECW World Heavyweight Champion, Raven, raced in, clipping the injured leg of the Sandman. Raven locked Sandman in a figure 4, with Sandman screaming in pain. Sandman reached for his cane, with Raven snatching it and bashing Sandman repeatedly over the head. Richards talked trash to an unconscious Sandman as a blood-soaked Raven struck his pose in the middle of the ring. Competing in a neck brace, Sabu battled Mikey Whipwreck in a violent encounter. The match featured numerous dives into the crowd and an insane table spot, with Sabu launching himself off a chair and the top rope to catch Mikey with a DDT through a table on the arena floor. Mikey crawled back into the ring, with Sabu making the cover to score a pinfall victory. Sabu helped Mikey to his feet and shook his hand. Stevie Richards brought Raven to the playground of his youth, introducing his latest offering to the champion. Laying across a bridge on the playground was the Blue Meanie, naked, painted blue, and only covered by a doll painted to look like himself. Richards introduced him as Blue Dust, with Raven saying he wasn't feminine enough. The episode featured a Pulp Fiction montage. Devon Dudley hassled Sign Guy, saying that he ruled the family. The Blue Meanie cut a promo as Blue Dust. After, Stevie Richards sprayed him with a hose. Raven said that he intended to show the Sandman how much pain he had to offer. The Sandman made a toast to the recently departed Dick Murdoch to end the segment. On June 22nd, at Hardcore Heaven 96, Taz competed in a shoot fight against UFC fighter, the Polar Bear, Paul Varlins. Perry Saturn interfered, jumping off the top rope and connecting on Varlins with a leaping sidekick. Taz planted Varlins with a T-bone Tazplex and locked in the Taz mission. Varlins tapped out, with Taz declared the winner. Bill Alfonso waved the orange flag, with Taz left standing, victorious. With the ring in need of repair, Komona Wanalea performed a striptease atop a balcony. The fans were more than willing to wait while this performance went on. This footage was infamous among tape traders in the 90s, appearing on the ECW VHS compilation Extreme Warfare Volume 2. Sabu and Rob Van Dam battled in the main event, with the action getting so out of hand that the ring itself broke. With the top ropes dangling, Sabu still managed to hit a triple jump moonsault on RVD. But the battle waged on, seeing RVD hit Sabu with a monkey flip onto the legs of a steel chair. Sabu battled back, hitting an Arabian press onto RVD, knocking him off the ropes. RVD retaliated with a Van Daminator, followed by nailing a somersault plancha on the floor. With a table set up between the ring and the guardrail, Sabu ran off a chair, launched himself off the top rope, and DDT'd RVD through the table. Sabu attempted a triple jump moonsault, but crotched himself on the top rope. RVD leaped off the chair, nailing Sabu with a sidekick. RVD followed it up by hitting Sabu with a fisherman's buster off the top rope, driving his head into the mat. Still, Sabu fought back and hit RVD with an Arabian facebuster. Both men were exhausted and injured, stretchered away from the ring. The June 25th episode of ECW TV featured footage from Hardcore Heaven 96 in the ECW arena. Joey Styles introduced Stevie Richards, who came out as Baron Von Stevie with Blue Dust in tow with his director, Patricia. Styles broke down, saying, "You know, if I wanted to work in a circus, I'd stay home in Stamford." He then looked at Blue Dust and said, "He looks more like Dusty Rhodes than his own son." Richards cut a promo doing a Baron Von Raschke impression, with Blue Dust saying he was going to prove Styles just how feminine he is. Styles scurried away, with Richards putting a claw on him. Aggravated, Styles threw down the microphone and made his exit. The ECW World Heavyweight Champion, Raven, made his entrance with Stevie Richards and the debuting Supernova in tow. Richards said that he found the dirtiest woman possible for Raven. Out came the Sandman's ex-wife, Peaches. The Sandman rushed to the ring, letting Raven know he was unfazed. Raven went on to defend the ECW Championship against a surprise challenger, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, who received a standing ovation. Gordy was ruthless, pounding on Raven in the crowd and bloodying him with steel chairs. Raven crawled onto the Eagle's Nest, where Gordy continued to smash him with a steel chair. Back in the ring, Stevie distracted Gordy, allowing Raven to hit a low blow and gain the advantage. That didn't last long, as Gordy nailed Raven with a lariat and applied the Asiatic spike. Stevie and Nova attempted to pull at Gordy's arms to break the hold. Tommy Dreamer ran in and hit a double DDT on Stevie and Nova. Brian Lee raced in and hit Dreamer with the Primetime Slam. Gordy went after Lee and hit a powerbomb. Gordy raked a length of barbed wire across Raven's forehead, with the crowd erupting, chanting ECW. Stevie ran in and nailed Gordy with a Stevie kick. Raven followed that up by drilling Gordy with an even flow to score the pinfall victory in a wild encounter. Tommy Dreamer ran in and nailed a DDT on Raven onto a chair. Brian Lee rushed in and hit Dreamer with another Primetime Slam. Raven's flunky stomped on Gordy and Dreamer until the Sandman cleaned house with a Singapore cane. The Sandman began to stalk Raven up the aisle, gripping the Singapore cane tight. Suddenly, Peaches emerged from the locker room with the Sandman's 8-year-old son, Tyler Fullington, who was dressed like Raven. The Sandman was in shock as Raven urged Tyler to break the news to his father. Tyler said, "Daddy, you're a drunk. Now I worship Raven." Raven cackled as the Sandman burst into tears. Raven then barked at Dreamer, accusing him of not being man enough to get Beulah pregnant. Beulah threatened to fight Peaches, while Sandman cried up the aisle, saying, "Tyler, don't do this to me." Blue Dust made his way to the ring, but was quickly attacked by Beulah and Komona.
With things reaching their... How would the Sandman carry